Election. Welcome to All Politics Are Local Extra. I am incredibly happy tonight to have Councilwoman Mildred Crump with us. Mildred Crump was the first Black woman elected to the Newark City Council in 1994, and she was the first woman to be president of the City Council, and that was back in 2013. And she's here with us today. She has a lifelong commitment to service. And on All Politics Are Local Extra, I'm just very happy to have her here. She's done amazing work throughout her life for the city of Newark. And so thank you for coming, Councilwoman Crump.
Well, I need to say to you, Jonathan, number one, kudos for all that you do in our community. Communication is so critical, and communication that brings out the best in many people when they are thinking about which way that they are going to make their decision. And I am secondly happy to be here. You are well known, and I feel honored that you thought I was worthy of being on your show. And so I'm excited. And, I love to talk. So, especially about community issues. So whatever you have for us, let's rock and roll.
Well, I'm absolutely honored to have you here. So, let's get into it. We have protests that are going. We're living in a day where we have protests going on that are greater than I've seen in my lifetime. We have elections that are coming up. This is election day right now. We're on the primary day. And what do you think of this moment right now that we're living in, where you see monuments being taken down, you see massive protests, we're locked away? What's going on now? What do you make of this moment?
I think it's a real strike for justice and equity. I know there are those who may criticize and don't understand the ethos of what's going on, but freedom hasn't always been free. And I think that this is a definite reflection of people of color, Black, brown, and even those who are poor, So this is a reflection of throwback. We're not going to take it anymore. Hashtag.
Have you seen something like this before? Like the massive amounts of protests that are going on, the reaction across the country and some parts of the world. Is there anything that you've experienced that's parallel to now?
Absolutely not. And I'm grateful that I'm still standing because I would not have missed this piece of history in America. I remember my first strike. I was a teacher, and there were issues back in those days in terms of the refusal to make teachers or to accept that teachers were deserving. And I started to say another way, but I'll say it this way. We're deserving of being compensated. When I started teaching, I made $3,000.
Wow.
Yes. And I need to tell you, that was in the 1960s. It was not in another century. And so as
$3,000 per year?
3,400. Don't forget my 400. And so we said enough is enough. And the school where I was in the city of Detroit, which is where the first strike by teachers was held. We were threatened. Cameras followed us. We were terrified, of course, but we were determined to make our mark in history. So
You said
protest is nothing new to me.
you said the strike in Detroit was the first
Teacher strike
teacher
in
strike
the
in
nation,
in the nation. Like there had never been a teacher strike before.
never.
What was what was that like, even in getting involved in that?
Pandemonium, absolutely pandemonium. You know, it's one thing to stand on the sideline and, you know, observe what's taking place. It's a whole different ball game when you're right smack dab in the middle. And so uh, the newspapers and the cameramen um, recognized us as separate from the others who were standing around just observing. And they would follow with cameras trying to get our picture because we were told we would be fired. It was very much like what is going on, but there was not quite um, as on the part of the people who were observing. There was a little, very little inclination to come and support. Today, it's a whole different ball game. Everybody is invited to involve themselves in making justice a reality in our country. But I treasure those former moments in my life when people were not so supportive of those who were striking. We were communists. We were, a bunch of other names. And I know you get the drift.
How did that first strike end? Like how did
We
that
won.
so and what did that
We
mean?
won.
And what does that mean? What did winning mean? And how did that happen? Like how did that
Well,
winning happen?
right. Number one, um, teachers um, were not as respected back in the day, and particularly in Black and Brown communities. Our our classrooms, and you get my drift, of course. The equipment was not the same as the high school on the other side of town. And so many of us who were striking, we were not striking for funding, but we were striking for equality.
So when you were striking for, so you were able to get that at the end. You were able to be successful in that particular strike. You were in Detroit. What brought you to Newark?
Oh, my husband, he was an engineer, and he was transferred from Michigan, from Detroit, to New York. Um, I did not like New York. It was too big. Believe it or not, Detroit at that time was a small town community. And because he was elevated to a position as president of the World Communications Corporation, we decided that we would stay close to New York. And we looked around, and some friends that we had suggested Newark. And we both fell in love with this great city. And we've been here since 1965.
Wow. So you got here right 2 years before the uprisings.
Absolutely.
Did you immediately get involved in the politics of the city? Like when you got here, what was it like?
Well, let me tell you this. The first chicken leg that I fried for anybody's campaign was when the Honorable Kenneth, now you know that's ridiculous.
Kenneth Gibson.
Kenneth Gibson, thank you so much. When Kenneth Gibson was elected, was campaigning and was elected, there were friends in our building who were very supportive of him, and we were invited to go to meetings. And I used to tease Ken when he was alive. I said, I fried my first chicken wing for you. So he thought that was, kind of funny. But the intensity of what we experienced, and I should add this, is that our building was also a headquarters for the troops. And there was something about driving up to the garage, and there is this group of soldiers who are carrying guns that are taller than you are. It was very intimidating.
But this is
And
after the uprisings. This is a few years later. There were armed barracks in Newark.
oh yes, in the South Ward. I can speak for that because that's where I lived.
So because I didn't never knew that after the uprisings there was like a military outpost in the South Ward of Newark.
Yes, and it lasted maybe about a week, just to make sure that we were obedient. It was a very strange time. You have to remember who was on the city council at that time, and they did not practice, and I'll use this term, equality. There was racism that was rampant, and they took every opportunity. Anthony Imperiali. I remember being in the march that the Honorable Amiri Baraka had going to Kayawita Towers. So it was not compulsion. It wasn't in a small space. It was in a big space. And so for those of us who challenged the system, we never were able to, how shall I say this without, we were never able to realize the dream of equality.
So how do you start getting more involved? Why do you start getting more involved, especially in a climate like that, where?
Well, I have to give honor to Winona Lipman, the Honorable Winona Lipman, the Honorable Pearl Beatty. These were my mentors. When they discovered and they investigated me, and Bob Curvin and Maurice and all of those people who had a stake in what was going on, they took an interest in me because what they didn't know was that I came from a family of activists, but it became manifested when I arrived here in New Jersey as well.
Now you said you came from a family of activists.
Angry.
You said you came from a family of activists. You say you came from a family of activists.
Oh yes.
So, what did they? Where were they activists at? What was?
Oh, my father was a union organizer, and he was fired from Chevrolet. You know, Detroit was a big automobile city. He was attempting to organize the men on the line, and they fired him for participating in those activities. And instead of subduing and making him be quiet, if I can say that, you had to know Edgar Coleman. It increased his activism, and so there were times when my family was required to participate in a march, and Detroit was ahead of the curve. Let me just say that too. We were required to be participants in the activism that was going on. As a high school student, our NAACP chapter was over 700 young men and young women. Ophir Dukes. I don't know if you remember Ophir Dukes. He's in DC now, I think. He was our president. And we challenged the system. We didn't know how to do anything else but.
And so you're in Newark, and you mentioned Winona Littman, and you mentioned Bob Curvin. Who are these people? And because a lot of people, our viewers, don't know who they are. And what was their, and what do you mean they had an interest in you? What does that mean?
Well, they, I guess, I was one of the newbies in the field of activism, who was not afraid to speak up. I was never rude to any of them. They were giants in my life. I mean, Bob Curvin, had it not been for intervention in the 1967 riot, along with others, he played a key part. Of course, the Honorable Winona Littman was the first African-American woman to be elected to the New Jersey Senate. Dorothea Lee, who was an outstanding, unbelievable community organizer. And as I said, I could go on and on and on. And I guess they saw something in me that encouraged them to grow in my activism.
So what was that process? What did you do? Like once you made this this mentor process, what did that entail? Because a lot of people want to get involved in politics.
What did I do?
And they don't necessarily know how to become involved in politics.
Yes.
What happened after you met them?
I started showing up in meetings. I'd go to the Board of Education. I'm a former teacher. It was a match that I would show up at the Board of Education meetings. And if I tell you this, those who may see this clip will know I'm telling you the truth. They hated my guts. They really did. They hated it.
Hello. I think that we're losing the connection some. I think we have lost the connection. So we will. This so far has been a really great interview, and we will hopefully be able to get you back shortly. But that's one of the reasons why I love these interviews, is because one of the reasons why I love doing these interviews is because I get to find out so much about people, and it's just very powerful. Oh, great, you're back.
Oh, yes.
All right. So you were saying you went to meetings and they hated you.
Oh, at the Board of Ed. Oh,
right.
Oh, they hated my guts. They really did. But that was okay with me as long as the educational environmental environment was improved. That was my purpose, and they started me to various meetings would come. I was already steeped in activism from even from my grandparents, who were both activists in the South, in Georgia. So what was in me just came out, and I decided. I never really thought I'd be an elected official, but I decided, based on an incident that I will share with you privately, and I said, I'm going to run. And my husband said, go ahead.
So,
And the rest is history.
so when you said, so can you give us any hint in terms of like what that moment was, in terms of like what motivated you to say, I'm going to run?
I don't know. I think it was an accumulation of many things. Um, I have for mendacity. Uh, and so living, and I learned this from the Honorable Shirley Chisholm. That was another moment I have to share with you that brought me to the light. She came to Newark. She said, I heard about this little girl. Who is she? And Connie Woodruff and Trish Morris and so forth and so on. We formed an organization to support her, and she endorsed me. And so people after that began to take me seriously. I wasn't just joking. Um, and the company you keep is important as your image, whatever it may become, is critical. And so I found myself hanging out more and more, not just with activists, but with people who had political ambition.
Okay. So,
And also, there was also one more thing I forgot to mention. The the respect that people had for the names of those who I just mentioned. And let me also throw in Earl Harris, who was one of my mentors. They gave me stature. So I thank them, you know, for what they did to help me. I remember Earl going into a meeting saying to one of the big unions, you better give that girl some money. And everybody turned around and looked. They said, who is she? And and that's just a little bit of my history.
so, so that first campaign, or was that your first campaign in '94 when you won? Was that your
Yes.
first campaign? What was that campaign
Yes,
like
it was.
getting in? Like, was it
It,
was it a tough campaign? Was it?
it was not. My campaign was run by Bob Curvin, Manolo Lipman, Maurice, by Dorothea Lee, Connie Woodruff, Trish Morris, Georgia Ransom, uh, there are some others, of course, but these are the people who woke me up in the morning and allowed me to go to sleep at night.
Hmm.
I had an upscale campaign headquarters in the Kislak building. No one had ever had a campaign headquarters in the Kislak building. So, people are attracted to those who are who represent uh, uh, I want to say nobility, but don't misunderstand my what I mean when I say that. And so I had the best of the best, organizing my campaign.
So what were the issues and when you first got here, uh, elected in 1994? What were some of the things that you had to fight for?
Racism was alive and well in Newark. It manifested itself in government. It manifested itself in the education system, housing, and one of the joys of my life was standing in front of, I want to say Stella Wright, because we had several, when they brought the building down. I think I probably cried. It gave people a chance to find a better way to live. My campaign was crafted by, as I said already, the best, and I instruct. I'm obviously not fearful of confrontation, and so I guess what was already God's design for my life. It happened.
You're, I think
From that day in 1994.
okay. So we were losing you for a while, but I think we have you back now. Um, yeah, we were.
Oh,
Are you
okay.
okay? Cool. So, but you were so you came back uh, to office in 2013, um, and you
Right.
became the first city council president, the first woman who became city council president in Newark. What
Yes.
was the was there a difference between 1994 and 2013 when you returned in the
Well, I
climate, what you were
won.
fighting for?
Well, I won, number one.
Okay.
And people see you differently. When you win, you may be ever so active, but there is a difference when you win. And I was not afraid, and I say this to up and coming leaders. There are some that I have begged over the years, please, and that is don't be afraid to listen to others who know better than you. And so it worked for me.
What do you mean by that? Like, don't be afraid to listen. Because there are a lot of people who would say, no, we need to fight against like the system. We need to fight against people who are around. And you're like, listen, what does that mean in the context when you're fighting for change?
Well, it means number one, we're not talking about those who are mistaken. I'll use this word, mistaken in their method of getting their message across. I am more of a person who tries to find common ground than opposite ground. Many of our unfortunately, and I hope that they're going to grow out of it because they have such potential, and I beg them that at some point in time, I know what I wanted to say. Being angry all the time is not going to help you win. You have to be angry. There has to be some energy that makes you, but that should not be the only MO for you to bring to the public stage. So as I was being groomed by these wonderful, incredible people, I listened. Some don't.
Hmm. We have a lot of young people who are running in current elections. There are a lot of young people who are energized by the current movement and what's going on. I believe one person who's running for office is even commenting now, like and watching the show. If you're giving advice to people who are young, who are hungry, who want to make a difference, who are sincere, and they want to make a difference in their communities, what new advice? What more advice would you give them moving forward? We're getting ready to end off, and I definitely want to know what would you say to people who want to do what you've done?
I won't tell you to people who want to, who just want to, but who should do. And that is number one, be true to yourself, be true to your community, and be true to the prospect of making a difference. Being a person who makes attempts to make a difference doesn't always have an easy road to hoe, as some older people will know that expression. You will be challenged at every moment, literally, of your life, as was I my emerging during my emerging years. But the thing is that if you truly and really want to make the lives of others better, and let me underscore the fact that I said for others better, not for you, not just for your family, but for those whose names you will never know. Make sure that your commitment is to those who are without, as well as those who have within.
Well, thank you so much, Councilwoman Crump. It's as always, it's always wonderful every time we speak, and this time is the same as the others. I learned a lot, and hopefully our audience did as well. So, again, thank you so much for coming on the show, and
I can't thank you.
And very much appreciate you.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me, because when I speak like this, Larry and myself and a couple of other people spoke at Rutgers, and I'm going to close. Spoke at Rutgers to the student body, and the most important comment that was made at the end of the program was by one of the students was, I now know what you mean. So I hope that someone who is listening will now know what I mean.
Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.